This is the fourth video in our series on implementing Google Maps in the Android emulator and displaying data from a JSON data feed in those Google Maps. I have other videos that cover JSON feeds in depth, so I'm going to go through that a little bit more quickly in this video, but this video will talk about JSON data feeds. What we're going to do is we are going to take some plant GPS data that I have, and this is the GPS data on the plantplaces.com website. If you go to plantplaces.com and then click on Plant GPS, you'll see a list of parks, a lot of botanical gardens across the world where I have gone in and GPSed plant data. This is one that's probably covered better than any other, which is the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. There are about 275 unique plants here. It might be a little bit large for us to manage right now. So I'm going to go to a collection where I have fewer plants, which is Central London. So if we take a look at Central London, we see Regent's Park, Hyde Park, that area within Central London. I have maybe a couple of dozen plants GPS total. So here we are. So what we're going to do then is I have the data here on a web page, but I also have it available as a JSON feed. So if you see www.plantplaces.com/perl/mobile/viewspecimens.pl *lat equals and then the latitude, ampersand LNG equals and then a longitude, a range, which incidentally I'm not using that, I'm calculating my own range behind the scenes. And then source equals location just tells us where we're getting the source of this data. If you have to have that on here to get results. If you don't have that on there, it will require some authentication. But if you want to use it publicly available, add this source equals location. Honestly, I have about 4,000 GPSed plants around the world. So that's why there's a range around it, so that we take these latitude and longitude coordinates plus or minus this amount. But as I say, I actually have that set behind in the server layer. I'm not using this range just yet. In any case, let's think about what we need to do here, because in our mobile app, we currently are showing, if this is the first video you're watching, it's the fourth in a series. So you want to watch the previous three to see how we got to this point. But we have a map, a geographic map. Okay, and our input here is going to be a latitude and longitude where we want to show plants. Okay, now we have to think about this though, because if we want to put markers on this map, we can go ahead and go over to England. If we want to put markers on this map, we're going to have to make a network call to plantplaces.com to get that specimen data. Okay, so if we want to put markers on a map, we have to do that call over the network. Now the trick is, this emulator we're using here is Android 4.4.2, so a KitKat release. And in 4.4.2, if you're going to do a network call, you have to do it on a separate thread. Okay? You have to do it on a separate thread. So we have to think carefully, what are our inputs? What are our outputs? Our inputs are going to be the GPS data, okay? The latitude and longitude, and those are both numbers. Specifically, they're floating point numbers. We could call them doubles. So that's going to be our input. So let me go back here to, let's go to, let's pick right around here, right around Hyde Park. Let me pick this guy here. I know I have a few Russian sage. Let me pick the Russian sage. And I actually don't think I've uploaded pictures from the UK yet for this, but we can grab the GPS location here anyway. So here's our latitude, 51.51 and change. Okay, I'm going to go over to my other tab. There's our latitude. Incidentally, this latitude 39 is the latitude of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. So see, you can get an idea how much further north London is than Cincinnati, which surprises a lot of people. Okay, longitude, we'll grab the first few digits from here as well. And again, this longitude is from London, and I'm using it to replace the longitude -84, which represents Cincinnati, and minus 0.17125, so on and so forth. I'm going to enter this, so that is my input. That is my query criteria. I'm going to hit enter, and we see we get a much smaller, much more manageable data set, because in this case, what it's showing us, if I go back to central London, what it's showing us now are just the plants right around that corner of Hyde Park, where I had just GPS just a few plants right there in Hyde Park in London. So it's just showing us a limited set of data. We could increase the range and try to get more of these plants in Hyde Park, or I could take one of these GPS coordinates from a plant that I grabbed out when I was in the neighborhood in London. But nonetheless, this is a viable amount of data that we're going to need to get. In Chrome, I can hold down Control and press U, and I can see the source of a page, and we see it's a bit more structured here. You know what? I also noticed one other thing. I went to a slightly incorrect page. That's a fixed width file we're looking at. For JSON data, the actual URL is view specimens JSON, and that will format it in JSON. Let me go back over here. And for our demonstration, I put this together as JSON because that's a bit easier to parse. So again, the URL we're going to hit, www.plantplaces.com/pearl/mobile/viewplantspecimensjson.pl ? And then the latitude and longitude. Okay, so here we go. So specimens, and here we are. This is JSON data. This is what we're going to want to call from our maps. So what's our input data? 2 doubles, possibly a third double, which is the latitude, the longitude, and a range. Let's go ahead and throw a range in there. Maybe we'll make that something configurable. So 3 double values, a latitude, longitude, and a range. Those are our inputs. What are our outputs? Our outputs are these JSON objects we're looking at here. Okay, our outputs are these JSON objects. Don't think of these as strings, because if you're thinking of these as strings, you're thinking of something that's not very object-oriented. It's much better to think of these as actual objects, as plant objects. So our job now is to make a thread, make an async task that will represent a thread that will accept latitude, longitude, and range, and will return a collection, perhaps a list, of plant objects. So let's have a look at our map of plants class. This is the same one we've been working on in previous lectures. OnLocationChanged is going to be invoked when our map notices its location is changed. That's what's going to start off this process of making a network call. And as luck would have it, we have double latitude, double longitude, and I can even make a constant up above. We'll say, let me give it a moment to resync here. We'll say private, double, range. We'll say private static final, double range. It's not really important that we add all that, but what the heck. Equals 0, 0, 1. So now we have our 3 inputs. We have our latitude, longitude, and our range. We have our 3 inputs. Okay. What we need to do now is define an async task. The async task is going to allow us to do a network call. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to create a class that extends AsyncTask. When we define our class that extends AsyncTask, we have to also think carefully about the exact values I just explained, the parameters coming in and the values coming back. We need to know what those are going to be when we define this class. This is an inner class. In other words, it's a class within a class. So I'm going to say class. Okay, notice where I am. I'm still within the main map of plants class. I'm defining a class within a class. Class plant search task extends async task. Okay, and if I did right now, if I did open curly and close curly, we're going to get a red line. And let's take a look at what that red line is. It's going to tell us that we need to, okay, well, async task can't be resolved to a type. Control-Shift-O will resolve it. Plant search task. Okay, this is going to tell us that we need to inherit an abstract method. But first, and most importantly, we need to define some things that describe this async task. And this is a little bit confusing if you're not used to generics. Okay, what we're doing, and this is really interesting, what we're doing is async task defines a method that we must override. And that method is called doInBackground. But we have an opportunity to specify what value types we're passing into that method and what value types we're getting back from that method. And that's what we do right here where my cursor is. We specify some generic types that say what values will be passed into that method and what values will be returned from that method. Okay, so we're going to do a less than symbol. Remember what we're passing in: a double latitude, double longitude, double range. So the first type is going to be double. I'm going to use a capital D because we can't use the primitive lowercase type. We have to use the class type double. But in recent versions of Java, there's something called auto boxing and auto unboxing that will automatically convert from the primitive type to the class type, so nothing to worry about. After the comma, I need to put something that represents a progress indicator. We're not going to use this in our example, but I'm just going to go ahead and fill it with integer. Don't worry too much about that. Finally, I have to tell it the return type. In other words, when I make this method call, what am I getting back? Okay, remember, don't think strings. Don't think strings, because strings are kind of not very object-oriented. We need to think in a more object-oriented approach. Okay, we're going to get back a list. A list of what? Well, a quick Control-M, and we'll take a look, and I will expand our Package Explorer, and we'll see that we have a POJO, or a DTO if you prefer, called plant. This is just a plain old Java class that represents a plant. We're going to have to modify that a little bit, but this is a type that we can use, and it's more intelligent than using a string because we can have things that actually describe a plant, where a string is just dumb data. In a plant class, in a DTO, we can describe that plant. We could even put behavior in and methods if we wanted to that further added some logic to that class. Okay, let me finish up though. We never want to leave a red line dangling. So I'm going to say the final type is a list of plant objects. Okay, and that's what we want our method to return. Both of these are going to redline, so I simply Control-Shift-O, and that solves the red line. Now, look at the consequence of doing what we just did. I'm going to put my cursor on plant search task, which is currently redlining, because we must implement the inherited abstract method do in background. I'll press Control-1, and I'll say add unimplemented methods, and take a look at what's going to happen. Look at this do in background. This is the stuff, this is the magic that's going to happen on a separate thread. And look specifically at the method signature that Eclipse has just automatically filled in for us. Return a list of plants, just as we specified here. Okay, except a parameter called double. Now what does the ... mean? That means that we can pass in several doubles of the same type, several values of double type. We can pass in 1, we can pass in 5. So this is kind of like a flexible array. And then within this, I'm going to change the comment to say, conduct a network call that will return a list of plants that match or are near the latitude and longitude values passed in. We'll fill that in just a moment. But first, let's make a call to this method. To make a call to this method, we're going to want to do that in the onLocationChanged method, because that method is going to get called when we change our location. Let me just do a little bit of cleanup here as well and change the comment to our location has changed. So let's get latitude and longitude values and save. Okay. Now create an instance of the plant search task. Okay. Plant search task PST equals new plant search task. Okay. And then start the PST thread. Okay, we do not want to call do in background directly. Trust me, we do not want to do that. Well, we can't because it's protected, but even if we could, that would call that logic in the same thread we're currently in, which avoids the whole point. We want to call this in a separate thread. To do that, what we actually invoke is a method called execute on this class. The execute method will initialize a new thread, and then once it has initialized that new thread, it will invoke this method in that new thread. So what we're going to do is we're going to say pst, just like we have up here on line 98, pst.execute, okay? And we need to pass in our latitude, our longitude, and our range, okay? Now again, notice, be very careful here. We're passing in 3 values. Uh-oh, what's wrong with range? Did I misspell that? Oh, range is all caps. Okay, so let me fix that. We're passing in 3 values, all are double type, but what's really weird is that this method only accepts 1. But remember what's going to happen behind the scenes. We're going to take these 3 values, stuff them into basically an array, and that array is what actually gets passed here. The Java virtual machine handles all of that for us. And then when we want to access them, we will pull them out one at a time from that array. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fill in the blanks to create markers from this list of plants. I will hold the JSON until the next video. That way, if you already know JSON, then you can pretty much watch the end of this video and you'll know what you need to know to use maps in the Android emulator. If you want to see the finish, then we'll go ahead and in the next video we'll also look at parsing JSON. So a couple things we're going to need to do. First of all, we're going to need to look at this plant this plant class to see if it's adequate for what we need. So I hold Control and press M, which brings me back to windowed mode. I click on plant.java, and what I'm going to see is that we have a genus, species, cultivar, common name, ID, and global unique identifier, where global unique identifier is the plantplaces.com ID for this plant. We have a toString method. We're looking pretty good. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, we're missing a couple things. If we look at our JSON feed, we're missing latitude, we're missing longitude, we're missing a specimen ID. Everything else I think we're okay. We're missing an address. But to be honest with you, there is a little difference between what a plant is and what a specimen is. For our example, I'm going to consider them one and the same. Okay, for our example, I'm going to consider those one and the same just to make things simpler. But if you actually look at plantplaces.com, there is a difference. For example, I'm going to click on our Russian sage we were looking at before. Russian sage, and all of the information that we have up at the top here, describes the plant Russian sage. As we go down here, we look at individual specimens of this plant. These are specific Russian sages at specific locations. For example, here's one in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, not the same one in central London, a different one. This is a specimen of the plant called Russian sage. This is one we can actually touch. Okay, Sharon Woods, Birmingham, and then 3 in central London. Those are all specimens of the plant Russian sage. So if I were doing this like I did on the real live plantplaces.com mobile, I would actually have 2 different classes, a plant and a specimen. But for our purposes, I'm going to combine these all into one called plant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the attributes. Let me Control M so we can focus. I'm going to add the attributes. We'll say private double latitude, private double longitude. You'll say private string notes, private string address. That might not cover everything, but it captures enough. I'm going to right click and we're going to make getters and setters for this. I'm going to choose source, generate getters and setters. We'll choose the 4 items that I just added, address, latitude, longitude, and notes. We're going to put them after set GUID. Okay? and then I'm going to choose OK, and we're going to let Eclipse do the work for us and generate a series of getters and setters, and there we are. So now our plant looks like it should. It has what we need to go ahead and create these markers. What I need to do next then is go back to my map of plants, and I need to figure out what to do when this network call returns. Again, remember that we're going to fill in the JSON details later. Right now in this video, we're just focusing on what we need to do in that network thread. Okay, so do in background will happen on a different thread so that it can be doing network activities which are relatively slow compared to other things that a computer will do. And by being in a different thread, our UI, our user interface, will continue to be responsive. The only trick about running in the background thread is it does not have access to things that are on the user interface thread or the main thread. Okay, so we can't add markers from this do in background. We have to be back on the UI thread to add those markers. As luck would have it, there's a way to do this. Do in background runs in a separate thread, but there's another method called on post execute, and I'll just start typing it. I won't finish. And that actually happens in the UI thread. So if I type that, hold Control, hit space, choose on post execute, it's going to override a method called on post execute from AsyncTask. And once again, it's going to be kind enough to automatically define this incoming parameter as the parameter type that we have defined up above. Okay? So that's automatic. Better yet, this method on post execute gets called automatically on the main UI thread after do in background is finished. Okay? So this is going to get called automatically, and this result list passed in is the exact same list that the do in background thread is going to return. So all I need to do here is I'll just clean some things up. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping. Now what I can do is a very handy Eclipse shortcut. F-O-R-E, Control space. Okay, take a look at the first option for each, iterate over an array or iterable. We'll select this, and Eclipse is going to make an educated guess that we want to iterate over this list of plants called result. And sure enough, there we go. And Eclipse is nice enough to fill in the details for us. So those Eclipse shortcuts can be really handy. They can save us quite a bit of time. It's always worth learning a few of those. So for plant result, what this means is iterate over the collection of results. Each time we iterate, go to the next item in the collection. Store that item into a variable called plant of type plant. That's exactly what I want. So F-O-R-E, Control space, it will autocomplete there. Okay, from here we need to do a few things. Create a lat LNG object. Okay, and we'll say lat LNG position. So this represents a latitude and a longitude combination. Equals new lat LNG, and then we're going to say plant dot get latitude, comma plant dot get longitude. Easy as that. Okay. Create a lat long object which represents a GPS position. Easy enough. And save. Control-Shift-O, organize imports. Okay. After that, we're going to say add a marker to the map. Remember, on post execute, and this is probably worth a comment, on post execute runs in the main UI thread and thus has access to UI objects. Okay? I'll put a comment here as well. Do in background runs in a thread separate from the UI thread and thus can perform network operations. We must invoke this by calling a method named execute. Okay, and we got that. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, add the marker to the map. Because we are in the UI thread, we have access to this map variable I've made earlier. Okay, this map variable I've made earlier. So we're going to say map dot add marker. Okay, and then we need to pass that a marker options object. Okay, so for the marker options, we're simply going to say new marker options, open and close paren. Okay, and then we're going to put a period and we're going to say position. And guess what? We're going to pass in that latitude and longitude position we constructed earlier. Okay, and then we're going to say dot title. And for this, we could just say plant. Or if you prefer, plant.toString. Okay, and we could also say, did I go too far here? Okay, we could also say snippet. Okay, and for that we could say plant dot get, we could say something like get address. That's fine, which may not always be populated, so that's not so important. But the plant.toString will be populated. Okay, Control-Shift-O, organize imports. That takes care of marker options. The toString will be populated. Let's see what that's going to return. That's going to return the genus, the species, and the common name. The genus, the species, and the common name, which is really what we want to see. And if we look at the plantplaces.com webpage, we are going to see that when we click on a marker, it's going to have a very similar behavior. When we click on a marker, we're going to see Acer platanoides, Crimson King, Norway maple. Acer is the genus, platanoides is the species, Crimson King Norway maple is the specimen. Now, as a future follow-up, once we have the JSON populated in our next video, what we can potentially do is have it so you click on this, and then it takes you to a details page. We'll consider that as an add-on video. But as of now, we're entirely ready to go for our JSON. We have our background thread that's prepared to do the network call. We'll fill that in our next video. And we have the on-post execute that's creating a GPS position and then making a marker out of that and adding that marker to the map. We've also cleaned up our plant DTO so that that will accept all of the information we're getting back from our JSON stream. So let's go ahead and call this a close to video number 4, and the next video we'll look at our JSON stream. Thank you.